Hi, I'm Morgan Booksh, and I'm going to be giving a response speech to do with the New York Times editorial entitled Measuring Success in Afghanistan. So here it goes. Humpty Dumpty sat in a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty back together again. Rule number one of good speech giving: never, and I mean never, open with an overused cliche or even worse, storybook rhyme. However, that's also rule number one of good journalism. And just like myself, editorialists across the nation who have been employed by the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the Chicago Tribune, and the Boston Globe have all broken this golden rule simply in order to equate the story of Afghanistan to the sad story of Mr. Humpty Dumpty. Specifically, they all ask why all of the president's forces and all of the president's men have not been able to put Afghanistan back together again. Like many before it, the New York Times editorial entitled Measuring Success in Afghanistan tried to do this same thing, to present a solution to the president for what to do in Afghanistan. And unfortunately, I think that their solution was a bit lackluster. To understand why my opinion formed the way it did, we have to look to two main areas of analysis. The first being problems which exist in the article's argumentation, and second being an alternative solution that I will present to you tonight. But the first thing we have to understand is that all editorials have flaws. And if we understand these flaws, we better understand argument. No matter how complex, each editorial can be boiled down to premises and solutions that follow from those premises. And the two premises offered by this editorial are: one, civilian deaths make war harder to win, and two, the United States is causing civilian deaths in Afghanistan. Therefore, the only logical solution that follows is that the United States should stop causing these deaths. And the New York Times attempts to present us with a solution that fits into that solvency. In fact, their solution is that the United States should spend money and time training Afghan forces to do the fighting that we're currently doing in Afghanistan. However, this satisfies neither of the premises. For one, the Afghan military has no reason to be expected to kill fewer civilians given that they haven't been around for as long as we have, and they're less trained. And two, the United States ultimately would still be responsible for these civilian deaths because we would be the ones providing time, money, and troops to train these Afghani soldiers. Therefore, we're not absolving the United States of responsibility by training Afghani soldiers. Instead, we're just hiding the United States' responsibility behind a curtain of hierarchy. Therefore, this solution is not one that fits the premises that even the article itself presents, and therefore is unfit for acceptance by our president or our nation or ourselves as voters of this nation. Therefore, I've come up with an alternative. The Economist magazine reported on February 27th of 2010 that an unmanned airstrike killed 27 civilians in Afghanistan. The article went on to explain that the civilian strike influenced a spike of violence in the Uruzgan province. This is hard proof that civilian deaths lead to more violence, therefore leading to a longer war that is more difficult for the United States to combat. In fact, it seems to be the case that we've been using too much hard power and not enough soft power. In his book, Soft Power, Joseph Nye explains the relationship between hard and soft power. Hard power being economic might and military power, and soft power being diplomatic finesse. If you use more hard power, when you use soft power, it will be more effective, and vice versa. And for 9 years in the Middle East, we've been using hard power. Therefore, we need some sort of soft power solution. The question remains, what sort of soft power solution are we looking for? And the one that I'm presenting is the use of specifically Special Forces troops in Afghanistan. Now, I imagine when I say Special Forces troops, a lot of you picture super soldiers who were plucked from birth to be America's next lightning-fast ninja killers. But in fact, as Hollywood would like you to believe, and our military would like you to believe, this is largely false. A Special Forces troop is simply a specialist, a military specialist. And the two sorts of specialists we need are agricultural specialists and infrastructural specialists. An Austin American Statesman report on July 21st of 2009 that there are troops in Afghanistan who are training Afghani farmers in modern farming techniques. This is the sort of initiative that we need to see funded in Afghanistan. Troops allowing Afghani civilians to empower themselves by gaining basic sustenance and being able to produce crops that support not only their family, but also yield a profit. Currently in Afghanistan, poppy is the main crop that's being used, and ironically enough, it was introduced by the United States 11 years ago, only to be utilized by the Taliban to gain immense profits. Poppy is relatively unvaluable alone, But poppy, when turned into opium, is incredibly valuable when sold on the black market, and that's where the Taliban likes to deal. That's where the Taliban gets its funding. And if we cut off the Taliban's funding and empower farmers, we empower the nation of Afghanistan itself and hopefully end this war. The question then becomes, what sort of crop can we introduce? Well, in a report released by the Jefferson Agricultural Institute in 2008, it outlines a bunch of different semi-arid and arid crops that grow and yield modest profits. One of them is called pearl millet. Like poppy, pearl millet is relatively unvaluable on its own, but when you sell it to producers of ethanol, they'll pay big bucks. Therefore, if we can give these Afghani farmers a different sort of crop to sell and grow, for instance, pearl millet, we not only empower them, and because pearl millet is a grain, it also can be used to provide for bread and other basic sustenance for Afghani farmers, but we also usher Afghanistan into a new alternative energy era, hopefully allowing them to get a jump on the ethanol market. And that's a very, very rare chance that we have, especially with a nation in the Middle East, especially with a nation who was previously so reliant on oil. And so if we can do this, hopefully we can end the war a lot quicker than people are predicting it will end right now. Therefore, if we understand the flaws in the editorial in the first place, and if we understand that there are alternatives that exist that look like they fulfill the premises set forth in this article even better than its own solution, then hopefully we've realized that perhaps all the president's forces and all the president's men won't be necessary to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And in fact, it will be a process that is much speedier than anyone would have thought.